This is the Sales Babble podcast, episode 500. What? 500? This is the 500th anniversary special with guest Denise Helmers.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hi, Pat.
Hey, Denise. How are you?
I'm doing great. And you?
Great.
Happy anniversary.
It's my anniversary.
It is. I can't believe it.
I can't believe it.
500 episodes. Wow.
Do you remember when we first started talking about this?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a lot. I remember we would be traveling, maybe to go see the boys at school, visiting your family in Peoria. We talked about it for a long time before it actually became a reality, and you were still working for another company at that time.
It was going to be a new hobby.
It was going to be a new hobby to begin with, right?
How do we come to the idea that it was going to be called Sales Babble?
Well, I kind of remember sitting around. Chris was home with us then, and we were just kind of talking and babbling. I think of the Tower of Babel, or in Babylon.
Yes.
And everyone's talking, and no one's listening.
Right.
So that wasn't the purpose of your podcast, of course. The purpose is for people to listen to you, but I think we just kind of thought Sales Babble, like you're talking about a lot of things, about sales, different things.
Yeah. So what's the point? So with that said, why are we here today? What are we going to talk about today, you think?
Well, I think we're just going to talk about your journey, how over time, over 500 episodes, how it's changed. You've changed the podcast quite a bit. But to go back from your purpose to where you're at today, and I still think, even though the podcast itself has changed, I believe your purpose is still the same.
I think so too. For fun, I listened to the very first episode today.
Oh, I should listen to it.
Yeah. I talked a lot faster than I do now. Mm-hmm. But you know the essence of what this podcast is and what it's about? It's the same.
Yeah, I don't think in my opinion, it hasn't changed.
I think people might enjoy listening to it if they've been listening to the podcast for a long time.
Oh, you should put the link to the first one in your notes. Yeah. That would be cool.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little hard to find on.
After 500 episodes.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to search a lot of things in somebody's website.
Actually, kind of the way podcasts work is a lot of those old episodes, you can't even easily find them if you wanted to on any of the podcast apps or anything.
Yeah.
A lot of them have a cutoff at like a couple hundred episodes.
Right. Yeah.
So for them to become easily findable, you got to go to the website.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense.
Salesbabble.com. And,
yeah.
So to answer that question, I think what we were looking to do, we've been consistent with. We've been consistent going down that path.
So, did you think you would still be doing it after all these years?
Gosh, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't think I ever thought about it. Mm-hmm. I never thought about how it would come to an end or anything. One thing I'm weirdly about, it's my weakness and my strength is, once I start something, it's hard for me to stop. Mm-hmm. I believe in tenacity.
That's true. I would agree with that.
It's a weakness, too. It's like, sometimes...
But there was a point when you were ready to change.
Yes.
And that's when you went to the Tao Te Ching of sales.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We should talk about that in a little bit.
right, in a little bit. Yeah. So, kind of doing some history here. Your background is in software and tech, not the media. It seems an unlikely pivot in your career. So why did you start the podcast? And what was the spark that motivated you to become a podcaster?
It's a good question. You sound like you read that.
I'm sorry. Do you want me to I did. Good question, Pat.
We'll just let that go.
Okay.
That is a good question.
Okay, thanks.
Because my degrees are in computer science, not in journalism. But I've always liked radio. I've always liked podcasts ever since they were invented. I'm an early adopter with that technology. Mm-hmm. Listened to a bunch of podcasts, still do today.
True statement.
But the idea of doing one, I just felt like it's possible. And I also felt like, I remember back then, I used to have a lot of windshield time. I was driving from deal to deal, and I would call my folks up and see how they're doing. There's only so much time. There's only so many phone calls you can do while driving a car. And I was looking for sales podcasts. I didn't like any of them. And I came to the realization of that a lot of what I was hearing was too transactional. It was too pushy. It was too go, go, go. It didn't reflect what I found was successful in selling software. Because back in those days, at that job, we were selling software services to school districts. And a lot of the advice that people were giving on these podcasts was like, would never have worked in a million years. It was like a bunch of silliness. Mm-hmm. It was fun buying the equipment. It was fun giving this a try. Remember back in those days, I had a separate office in the house.
Yeah, right. You did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
So you talked about being transactional about, I think you wanted to add to the conversation on sales about being transactional. What else did you want to talk about sales that you wanted, obviously, help in or guidance in, but you didn't find?
Yeah, I found a lot of people don't look in the long run. They're looking in the short run. I just bumped into that just today with somebody trying to sell me something. And I felt like she was just trying to get the deal out of me. But the other thing I bumped, in years of training salespeople, I saw a lot of people who were very afraid of what people thought of them. And they didn't want to get their feelings hurt. They were afraid of being rejected. And how that showed up was they were afraid to pick up the telephone. They were afraid to call people, afraid to email them, afraid of being too pushy, afraid of walking up to their door and knocking on it. And that was some of the stuff I wanted to talk about. A lot of people are pretty disorganized. I mean, like the classic follow-up thing, they only follow up twice because they're just not organized enough to remember, maybe I should do a third, a fourth, a fifth, or sixth time. Like that troubled me greatly. And you know how people use CRMs and how they use them poorly. It bugged me when I see a lot of salespeople, and I had some people doing this too that worked for me. They felt like they knew what was best for their customers without really digging into what their customers' problems are or their hopes and dreams. We call that hubris, right? I think I know better than everybody else. And I think that it's weird that sales is considered different from other professions. That we have to compensate people differently, and we immediately think there's something icky about them. I still bump into this luck. I have a couple podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. I tell people on my other podcasts they're interested. I tell people I have a sales podcast, and they're like, oh. You can just see their eyes just roll. It's like, ugh. Oh.
Yeah. Everyone thinks you're the car salesman, right? Apologize to any of the car salesmen out there who are listening.
Yeah, I don't mean to pick on those people, but that's a transactional business. Mm-hmm. That's the issue. Very rarely do you sell the same person twice.
Mm-hmm. So how has the podcast changed over time? I know it's not about selling secrets for non-sellers so much anymore,
no,
is it?
It's not, is it? When we started, I was thinking it was about new people new to sales. But after interviewing so many people in sales, I couldn't stand it anymore. I was getting so bored of interviewing supposed sales experts and hearing them say the same things over and over and over again. And it's not what they were saying was wrong, necessarily. It was just getting really old. And I also felt that sometimes they didn't touch the fundamental core of what good selling is about. And my fundamental core has always been based in Taoism, which I know is weird. An ancient Chinese philosophy written 2,500 years ago. But I read a book on that many, many years ago, long before I was ever in sales, and it has really influenced in how I see leadership, how I see partnerships with people, the relationships I should have with the world, where I fit in the world, where the world fits with me, how it's all one thing. So I've always seen sales from that point of view, and I've always talked about it from that point of view. In fact, I actually blogged about it. When was that blog? That was a while. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I blogged. That was called the Tao Te Ching of sales or something. I called it something like that. That was a long time ago.
At least 10 years ago.
But I didn't want to do that in the podcast. I thought that was too esoteric. Mm-hmm. I thought that was too arcane. But I did decide to change this podcast towards that. Stop interviewing people and start talking about it, with the idea that maybe if I write a little bit about it every week, if I do it long enough, I'll have a book.
Mm-hmm. But weren't you worried about potentially alienating your audience by doing that?
Yes.
Worth the risk, though, huh?
It was. In fact, I could see I was getting 5,000-6,000 downloads a month. And then when I switched, it went down to 2,500. It plummeted.
Yeah.
But I was kind of surprised. I just kind of kept at it. After 2 or 3 months, it came back up to where it was. Oh. And I think what I did was I kind of switched a lot of people around, maybe lost some old people and got some new people. Mm-hmm. But I just knew that this is something I really wanted to do. It can't be about some vanity metric. Mm-hmm. It's got to be, you have to be who you are, and that's why I switched.
Right. And it's your podcast, so I think you could do that.
That's something you say all the time.
Yeah.
Every time I ask you, should I try this, you say, it's your podcast, Pat. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think I'm right. I mean, it's not like you don't have metrics for, how many are people watching it. And you never went into it to do that. You never went into it to make money. You did try at the beginning a little bit, I think. That was a goal. But in the long run, you're always happily surprised when you get a sponsor. I know.
It is weird. It's weird how it's made me money over time.
Right, and you've had a few more sponsors since you switched to the Tao Te Ching of sales.
I have.
Really? Yeah.
I have.
So, you have to enjoy what you're doing, and you're in a position where you can do that. And personally, I think if people can do that, that's a gift.
It's not like I got a boss and they're telling me what I ought to do. I'm hoping to create something here, and people like it. which is what I've done.
So what have you learned about podcasting that you didn't know when you started? Maybe that you're the boss? Besides that.
Podcasting's weird. You can't grow it by advertising. You can't grow it with social media. You can't grow it building email lists and stuff like that. That's not how you grow podcasts. People who listen to podcasts only learn about podcasts one or two ways. Either someone tells them to listen to the podcast, or they're listening to a podcast and they hear about a podcast on that podcast. Which is why the Science of Scaling podcast was on Sales Babble this summer. Because they really liked my audience. My audience was the same as their audience, and they felt that it was worth the trouble to sponsor me. Because that's the only. I didn't know that. I didn't know that when I got started. So I spent a lot of time learning. Right. I mean, I learned all kinds of stuff: Facebook ads, Google ads, SEO.
Yeah.
Tweeting and none of that stuff. I didn't know that at the time, but none of that stuff works. And it's taking a while for people to come to this realization. But I also found what's interesting about podcasting is it gives you an opportunity to meet anybody you want in the world.
It's very true.
I can get a free press pass to go to any conference in the world.
You get lots of free books?
I used to get a lot of free books. I think that slowed down finally. It's it's interesting. Podcasting can make you an expert, like writing a book can. But it
You mean like an expert on a topic?
On a specific topic.
All right, so what have years of interviewing sales experts and then noodling on the sales in the context of Taoism, taught you? You can edit that if you like.
I could. Well, Taoism's a weird word because it's spelled with a T and you pronounce it with the D, and there's a long story behind that when they started translating Chinese into English, but I won't go into it. What was the question?
So the question was, after years of interviewing sales experts and then noodling on sales in the context of Taoism, what have you learned?
One thing I've really learned, and I knew it before, but I think I've really, really, really got it, is that you need to listen before you talk. You need to ask open-ended questions. That way you know exactly what the prospect wants or what they're concerned about or what's hurting them. What aspirations do they have? It's just a weird myth that great talkers are sellers. Actually, some of the best salespeople out there don't talk much at all. I have a quote for this. It says, Lao Tse says something along the lines like, those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know. It's just this whole idea that people, it's kind of a joke, right? People that talk a lot want to give you the idea that they know stuff. They don't. It's the quiet ones that are actually listening. They're the ones who understand the true secrets.
Right.
Another thing I think I learned is that there's not enough humility in sales, and that too often we think we know what's best for our customers. And of course we're excited about what we sell, right? You shouldn't be selling stuff you don't love. But sometimes I see this a lot, where the prospect says something that immediately you can fix, and then people jump on it. When in reality, you're like, well, let's ask some more things before we start talking about us. Instead, they start talking about their thing, and that's just wrong. Another quote here from Lao Tzu. He said something along the lines like that: the wise man is one who knows what he does not know.
Tricky.
It is. I think it's huge for us to know that I have no idea what they're thinking, and that's okay. Why don't I just ask them and find out, instead of just assuming that they're a good fit? You see that a lot. I think another thing that I've learned that's really important in sales is patience. A lot of people are far too impatient. They think the sales cycle should go a lot faster than it is. They forget that tenacity is what really makes a big difference. I think we brought this up earlier before. You have to follow up. There's been a lot of science behind this. You have to follow up like 8 times with somebody before you get to catch their attention.
Right.
That means like sending them an email, and then call them up, leaving a voicemail, and then maybe pinging them on LinkedIn, and then repeating that like 3 times, to keep going that over and over and over again. Right. It takes that many times. Aren't you being pushy? No, I'm not being pushy. Most people are very busy. They got a lot going on in their lives. They didn't even see half of that, what you're doing.
Yeah.
They don't have that patience to wait. But the Tao got like something, it says something along the lines like, water is soft, but with time, it can cut through the hardest of rock. And that's how I see sales. Like, it just takes time. You can grit it away. You can eventually wear it away if you just play. Just as long, it's all about, it's not being mean. It's all about being pleasant. Right. It's about being pleasantly persistent. But that's what that's about. I think the overriding thing, this is the last thing I think that's really important, is that it's really important for sellers to have this notion that their job is to help other people. It's to be empathetic and compassionate with the struggles that people are having. We're actually happiest when we're with other people and when we're helping other people. And that if we just help others, eventually you're going to find success in sales. You're actually going to fulfill your commissions. I think I got a quote on this. Here it is. Oh, Lao Tzu said, "The sage has no mind of their own. They are aware of the need to help others. They are good to people who are good, and they are good to people who are not good. Virtue is goodness." And I like that. Some customers are a pain in the butt. They're not the nicest of people. But they deserve our best also.
So, what can we expect in the future for the next 500 episodes?
Oh. I don't know. Short term, I think what people can expect, people expect me to get this book done next year. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun reading it and digging into that. I'm going to put a lot of concerted effort into being on other people's podcasts and rebroadcasting those interviews and different views of that. There are other things that are applicable to sales that might be interesting when it comes to these philosophical kinds of things. Like Sun Tzu's Art of War, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, the Stoics. They wrote a lot of interesting stuff I think are applicable to sales. I don't know.
That's okay.
I think it's gonna be interesting no matter what.
Right.
I think that's
think you've kept it fluid, everything you've been doing.
Yeah.
You know, you're not attached really to anything.
No. It is amazing that I've been doing here, that we've been here for 500 years. I really feel like you're my co-founder.
Well, thanks. 500 episodes.
What did I say?
Years.
500 years?
Yeah.
500 episodes.
500 episodes.
500 years, that'd be a lot of episodes.
That'd be a lot, yeah. But, well, no, I enjoy the conversations. You're happy doing it. It's been interesting.
It's been very, very
I
interesting.
mean, I've learned about podcasting.
It's been very rewarding. Yeah.
Read some books from some people recommended by some of your guests.
Yep.
It's always fun.
I've had some terrific guests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Some people over and over and over again.
I always enjoy Neil.
Everybody loves Neil. Neil's the guy who we do the
Yeah.
top 10 around Christmas time. Yeah.
And but what you talk about is very interesting too.
Applicable.
Yeah. Technology usually, or tools. And I
We
think
were starting to talk about AI last December. Just when ChatGPT was just coming out. We were way ahead of the curve.
Way ahead of the curve, always. So I'm so proud of you.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for all your support. Couldn't have done it without you.
Group effort.
Go team.
Go team.
And that's that.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.